In this video, we'll be creating a simple dialogue system in Unity. This video is going to require that you've at least seen the interaction video, unless you already have some sort of interaction system in your game, because to activate the dialogue, we're going to create an interactable object that'll actually trigger some dialogue. I'll show you how you could trigger dialogue in a couple other ways, so we'll save that part to the end, or I'll make the interactable now, but at the end I'll say how you could do it in other ways. So if you're not doing an interaction script thing, just ignore the interactable things I'm going to throw at you right now. First thing I'm going to do is our player does have a player input component as well as a top-down movement script and an interact script that were created in the respective videos. You don't need a top-down movement script from my video. You just need some sort of movement script in your game at some point, although I do recommend my solution because it's the most recent as far as videos you'll see. But what we're going to do here is we're going to start by creating an object. I'm just going to create a little circle. I'm going to call it like NPC, for example, and then give this a box slider 2D. And I will give it the interactable script. Again, if you're not doing interactables, just ignore that. And then I'll put it on the interactable layer. Okay, this thing is what's going to trigger our dialogue when we try interacting with it. Now let's start actually creating the foundation of our dialogue, which is going to be a UI element. So we're going to create a canvas. Canvases house UI elements in our game. For example, all the text and images and stuff like that, that's part of your HUD or your pause menu or your start menu, that's in a canvas. So start by clicking the plus button in your scene and then click UI canvas. And we'll see that it creates a really big object. The canvas is at a completely different scale than the rest of your game. If I right click the canvas and click UI image and put this at the top left of the canvas, notice how far away it is from the top left of the camera, by the way. This will appear at the top left of our game. Anything UI related is relative to the canvas instead of your camera. So I'm just moving it around and you can see where it goes. This is really important to know so that you don't get tripped up by UI differences from the rest of the game. Now that we have this, we don't actually want the image. Actually, I guess we do want the image. What we're going to do is we're going to create a little box for our text to appear in. We'll do a very simple like black box here. We're going to resize it so that it fits kind of the bottom of our game here. If you want more in-depth UI tips, I would watch the start menu video and then eventually the pause menu video. We're going to rename this image to text background, and then we're going to right click the canvas and then create UI text mesh pro as well. We're just going to call this one text. Now I'm going to resize the text here so that it fits well within the box. But again, there's probably a few things you should do to make it fit better. I won't go into too much detail, but you should mess with the anchors, and then I will go into detail with this real quick. The canvas has this canvas scaler component, and the scale mode should be set to scale with screen size, and then set the reference resolution to 1920 by 1080. And then before you do anything else in your game, just make sure that it's back to looking good as far as the size goes. This is going to be a really easy way for it to scale with different screen sizes, so you can know it'll work on your tiny monitors and as well as the giant smartboard. Anyways, text background text here. This is a little disorganized. These things are related, but they're only childed to the canvas, which always houses all UI elements. So let's shift select to select both of these, and then right click and click create empty parent and call this dialog box. Our dialog box now has a text background and text in it. Let's customize the text real quick. I want to change the size to 40, and then I want to change the alignment to be center aligned on the y-axis, but not on the or x-axis. Yeah, whatever. Center aligned vertically, but not horizontally. That's all I want to change really. This text background here is good how it is. Let's do the, let's just start with the dialog script. So on our dialog object, let's do, instead of clicking add component here, let's go in the scripts folder and then right click and then do create mono behavior script and type in dialog. The reason we're adding a script this way is because we can directly put it into our scripts folder. If we would have done it the other way, it would have put it in our assets folder instead. We would have to manually move it over to our scripts folder, because you should be having a very well organized project that should definitely have a script folder. If you don't, you should do that. Well, only if it's very early in the project. Moving things around after GitHub stuff happens is a very bad idea. So I wouldn't move things around if you've already done a lot of stuff. Anyways, with our dialog box object, we're going to drag this dialog script onto it, and we're going to open up the script and start coding. What we want this script to do is we want to be able to give it a list of dialogue that it will run through when the player clicks the button to skip through, and then when it's done, it should go away. And before it starts, it should be invisible, obviously. Right now, it's very, very visible. Let's start by getting rid of void start and void update, and let's create all of the variables we're going to need for this. Let's have a, okay, I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this. We're going to start by doing a public string, and we're going to call this dialog, and you can just watch this for now. A string is a variable that lets the user write text. And making it public, we can see it inside of Unity. So if you go back to Unity now, you can see it says dialog here, and it has this little text. This isn't big enough for a dialog though. So let's try adding something called an attribute for the word public. If I add square brackets, we can give this variable metadata. The metadata we want to give the variable is the fact that it should be a text area. A text area string allows you to write string with much more space. There's also one called multi-line, and I always forget the difference. Let's see. Multi-line didn't really do much. Yeah, text area is definitely the right way to go. Here's the issue though. We might want dialogue with multiple lines of dialogue, and we don't want just one here. So what we're going to do is, instead of a public string of dialogue, we're going to make a list of strings, which is part of a namespace called system.collections.generic. So let's throw that in real quick. After the word using Unity Engine, we're going to say using system.collections.generic. What this means is that if I hover over list, you'll see it says class system.collections.generic.list. C# and really every language has so many classes and functions and variables that there are these things called namespaces that are used to organize them. Think about it like folders for your code. There's a namespace called system, which inside of it has dozens of more namespaces. In the collections namespace, there's 4 namespaces. In the generic one, there's nothing else. That's as far as it goes. But there's a lot. Any variable that you make a list inside of Unity will now actually show up like this. If I click this here and then click the plus button, watch this. I can do multiple of these now. The first one second, my Unity's really bugging out. For the first one second, I gotta redo the window layout. Where is it? Okay, the first one I could say hi, I'm Bob. And then the next one I can say, what's your name? And then I can just add more text here. And I could say goodbye, for real. And then it would go through these 5 dialogues, theoretically, right? But I want to add a little bit more. I want to say, yes, sure, give us a dialogue, but we're going to take it a step beyond. I want to add support for 2-way conversations, because that's going to make your guys' games just immediately stand out a little bit more. Instead of just a string here, we want 2 strings. One string, again, strings like text. One's going to be the name of the person talking. The other one's going to be what they're saying. Unfortunately, we can't just say string, comma, string and put 2 strings like that. It doesn't work that way. What we're going to do is create our own type called a dialog piece. And that dialog piece type is going to have 2 strings inside of it. So to do that, above your public class dialog, you're going to write public struct dialog piece. This is a user-defined type. This lets you create your own data inside here. All we're going to do here is have a text area, public string dialog, and above that, a public string name. And then inside of here, we're going to get rid of text area. And instead of a public list of strings dialog, we're going to have a list of dialog pieces. One more thing to get this to work is above the word public struct dialog piece, you just need to write in square brackets serializable, which is part of the system namespace. Notice when I started typing that I just pressed down and I pressed enter, and it finished the word serializable and it also automatically imported the correct namespace. So now we have our own public struct called dialog piece that's serializable. You don't need to know what a struct is right now. Just know that it lets us put multiple variables into one that we can use in things like lists. Back to our Unity, we'll see that list is empty. Let's go ahead and add something to it. And it has this little drop down here. If I open the drop down, my Unity is being super terrible right now. Super terrible timing. We'll see two things, a name and dialogue. Let's add 3 of these. So the first one, say Derek, and say, hi, I hope this video is helping. And the next one is going to be Kira, and she's going to say, what would Kira say? Hi. And then we'll have Jim, and Jim's going to say, hi, I'm Jim. So now, because our dialog piece had these 2 variables in it, and our list is of dialog pieces, each of these contains both those variables now. And what we can do is we can use these variables when we are writing our text to the game. But first, I just want to mention, you could add your own things here too. Like maybe each character has a public string, like maybe it's going to be like a title or something, like under the name might say like Prince of this character's like land or whatever. Or you can say public float, text speed, or maybe you could even do a Unity event for what happens after they finish talking, so on finished or whatever. A lot of stuff you could do there. We're going to keep it simple for the video though. We're just going to do these 2 things. Our dialogue here is good now. The settings are good anyways. Let's actually make the code that's going to make our dialogue run. Inside here, we're going to make a public void called start dialogue, and then add parentheses and curly brackets. Any code that we write in here is going to happen whenever we call the start dialog function. So before we do anything, actually, I'm going to plug this function into our interactable script. So I'm going to go into here, and then I'm going to find the little circle guy, the NPC, and in its interact script, what we do is our dialog box, we're going to hit the plus button here and then drag it in. And then where it says no function, we're going to change it to dialog, start dialog right there. Now whenever we interact with this object, it's going to run the start dialog function, and any code we put inside of here is going to happen. So just to show you what I mean, I'll put a debug log to test it out real quick. It should now print hello world, which clearly is not what we want to do. But let's just try it anyways, just to see if this in theory works. Man, this editor stuff wasn't happening last night. I'm so confused. Oh yeah, let's hide the dialog box so it's not in the way. Let's walk up to the thing and press E, and it says hello world. So it successfully ran this function, which means now that we know that this works, we can actually start writing our dialogue. If you have like another method of your dialogue running, then this is where you'd want to like plug it in. For example, if you want your dialogue to run when you touch something, I would look at the hazard video, because that has information about how to make something happen when you touch something. I'll show you really quick, just the script from that video. Basically, all you need to write is an onCollision enter 2D function, and then put your code in here. So what I would do is write code, like make a public dialog, and then here just say like start dialog or whatever, and then plug it in the inspector. If you're doing this, just talk to me. I'll help you with it. But we're going to keep the video very generic, and we're not going to talk about implementation. We're just going to talk about how this works on its own. Okay, let's start the start dialog now. Let's think about how this dialog box should work. The text should be empty when we start, and then every like 10th per second or something, a new letter should come out based on the dialog that's currently printing. And then we click the button, the text should all go away, and it should start printing the new text. So let's do that. In our code here, what we're going to do is we are going to, first thing we're going to do is clear out whatever text we already have. So under our public list dialog, let's add a public tmpro.tmp_text. Very long and very confusing. That's how you access a text mesh pro component. I'm going to call this dialog text, and then I'm going to make copy and paste by doing Control-C, Control-V, and then I'm going to call the other one dialog name, and I'm going to switch it around real quick. Before you do anything else, I want these here because if I go back to our code here, we need a way for this script to reference this text object here. So we're just going to take, we're just going to take the dialog text and drag it into here. Oopsies, here. And then I'm going to copy and paste this and make it a lot shorter. This is going to be the name. I'll make this one a little bit like that. And then just to make the name stand out, I'm going to bold it, and I'll center it as well, so we know this is the name. In the dialog box, I'm going to drag that in. So now that we have references to the name and the text, we can actually modify and do things with those. So in our code here, in start dialog, what we're going to do is, let's just test it out. Let's say dialog name dot set text in parentheses and quotation marks. We're going to say testing, and then we're going to say dialog text dot set text. I don't know why I keep doing that. Hello world, like that. Again, this doesn't actually reference this at all, but whenever we try something new, we want to test it out first. So before we write all this dialog code, we want to test to make sure we can actually set the text in the name and the text here. The set text part is a function. Quotation marks means it's a string, so it's like text. Anything you put inside of here is going to be put into the dialog box in this case. So let's try it out. When we interact with our circle, this text should change. Perfect. Let's do a couple things. Let's make the dialog box go away by default by unchecking the box here. And then let's go into our code and then start dialog. Let's, I want to try something out. I actually don't know if this will work. We're going to do GameObject.setActive true. I don't know if this code will even run if the game object's inactive. So actually, I don't know this yet. But this line of code would bring the object back from being inactive or disabled. So let's see if that does what I think it'll do. Oh, great, it works, Cool. So again, this line makes the object come back. Game object just means get the game object that this script is attached to, which in this case is the dialog box. And then set active says, basically, check this box right here with code. Okay, let's get rid of the test code. And we're gonna make a public void called, we're gonna call it, oh no, we're gonna use something called coroutine. A coroutine lets you run code over an amount of time or frames specifically. The reason we're gonna use that is because we're trying to write text over time. So we're gonna say public enumerator, and then we're gonna do this one. We're gonna call it we're going to call it write dialog piece, like that. And then parentheses and curly brackets. What we want this to do is we want, well, that's what I was specifically trying not to do, is I don't want the one with parameters. I just want IEnumerator. We want this one from system.collections. So you should have these 4 namespaces at the top: Unity Engine, System Collections Generic, System, and System Collections. And the IEnumerator should look like this so far. We're going to write a dialog piece, and what this function is going to do is we're going to say which dialog piece do we want to write first. And to do that, we're going to add that as a parameter. So we're going to say dialog piece, dialog. And then when we run the function, we can tell it which one we want. But before we do that, let's talk theoretics for a second. Inside the curly brackets here, we're going to say, first of all, set the dialog name, and then set the dialog text. So we're going to do that dialog name thing we talked about earlier, .set text. And then in parentheses, we're going to say dialog.name. Because remember, our dialog piece struct we had has a name and the dialog. The next thing we're going to do is, let's just set the text all at once first to see what happens. So we're going to say dialog text.set text dialog dialog. You notice it's yelling at us. The enumerator needs a line that says yield return null for now. We'll change that later, but right now we just want to make it happy. This code should theoretically work, but we're not referencing it yet. You notice it says 0 references. We need to actually run this code now. So to do that, in our start dialog function, we're going to write a line of code here that says write dialog piece, which is the name of this, and then parentheses, we're going to say dialog, and then square brackets 0. Whenever you have a list, you need to always tell it which item you want from the list. And to do that, you add square brackets and then put a number in between those brackets. 0 is the first thing in the list. It's weird. It's called being 0 indexed. When something is 0 indexed, you start counting it at 0 instead of 1. The reason has to do with pointers and stuff like that. That's above your guys' skill level. It's something I didn't know until college anyways. Now this is yelling at me, because if this was a void, you would call it just fine like this. But when you're running a coroutine, you actually need to run it through a function called start coroutine. So I'm just going to hover over this, and it says coroutine should be called using start coroutine. So we're going to click show potential fixes, and then the second one says use start coroutine. This is how you format starting your coroutine. It's because of how Unity handles it behind the scenes. It doesn't matter why. The point is that if your function is a IEnumerator that can pause and like run code at different intervals of time, then you need to use start coroutine, because it's kind of like running your code in the background, and the start coroutine tells it whatever this code is, run it in the background. Okay, this is good. Let's go to our code and let's see if it'll print Derek and then this text down here when we interact with the circle. Look at that. It printed the name and it printed the dialog of the first thing here. If I move things around a little bit, move Kira first, it should print Kira's message instead. Perfect. By the way, I'm pressing Control S pretty often. You should get in the habit of saving just every like 2 seconds, really. Okay, this is actually really good. We're actually pretty much almost done. Only thing we need to do is make sure we click and it goes to the next piece of dialogue, and then that this dialogue text gets set over time and not all at once. So let's do that one first because it's easier. Here, what we're going to do is instead of dialogue text.set text, we're going to create something called a for loop. A for loop lets us run code multiple times. What I mean by that is if you type in something like this, for int I equals 0, I is less than 10, plus plus I, ignore a lot of this except for the 10 right now. Whatever code I put in here is going to loop 10 times. What we want is for our code to loop once for each letter in our dialogue. So where it says 10 here, we're going to say dialogue, dot dialogue dot length. The length means how many letters are in our text, which is exactly what we want this to do. I'll explain for loops in a separate resource, by the way. Inside here now, what we're going to do is we're going to say dialog text, which is our text mesh pro, dot text. We're going to see if we can do this. Plus equals dialog dot dialog square brackets I. Now I mentioned square brackets lets you get something from a list earlier. Like if you have a list of a bunch of strings, 0 would be the first string in the list, 1 would be the second thing in the list. It grabs that thing. Strings are actually lists. They're lists of letters. So if my words were hello world and I said square brackets 0, that would be H. Square brackets 1 would be E. So think about strings as lists of letters. They're actually called strings because you string together multiple characters to make the text. So what this code says is take whatever text is already in the box and add the next letter in our dialog next. Now we haven't added any code that like repeats this or like waits for a second or anything like that. So this is going to do the exact same thing it did before. So let's add a little delay. The whole point of making coroutines is allowing us to do delays and stuff like that. So to do that, you type in yield return new wait for seconds, and then in parentheses, you type in how many seconds you want to wait for. We'll say 0.05f, and we'll say 0.1f. We'll see what that's like. And now we don't need this last part here because we have our yield return. So whenever you write a dialog piece, it sets the name and then sets the text. But actually really quickly, let's reset the text because I realized we should have it 0 out first. So we're taking our dialog text and we're making it nothing. And then we're going to use the for loop. And with a 1/10 of a second delay, we're going to add a little bit of dialogue just over time. Let's go to our game, check it out. If I run into the circle and press E, we see it was kind of hard to tell because Kira's first. Let's move me first again. And then you'll see when I interact with the circle that the text comes in over time. Perfect. Now, magic numbers are a bad thing. I've mentioned this in a couple other videos. This 0.1f is kind of hard to tell what it means just looking at it. And if we want to change the dialog speed, we'd have to change the code. Not good. What we're going to do is under public list of dialog piece dialog, we're going to say public float text speed. A float lets you set a decimal point number inside of the Unity inspector. So instead of 0.01f here, we're going to write text speed. We're also going to give this float a default value by saying text speed equals 0.1f. Now, whenever we add this component to something, the text speed value in our inspector will be, will be 0.1 by default. But we can still change it and it will respect the new number that we choose. But the default, if we don't change it, is 0.1. Okay, this should work totally fine. I want to mention something real quick though. This start coroutine write dialog piece thing here, this is, again, 0 is grabbing the first thing from our list of dialogue. 1 would be our second thing. What we want to do is we want to say, when we start the dialogue, get the first thing. We click, we want to get the second thing. We click again, we want to get the third thing. If there's nothing else, then stop the dialogue. Let's do that. Actually, speaking of stop dialogue, let's add a stop dialogue function. Let's say public void stop dialogue. And here, all we're going to say is game object.set active false to make the dialog box go away. I just want to set that up because I know we're going to use it a little bit. This is perfect. This works the way we want it to. We want to check for the user clicking on the dialog, and if they do, proceed. To do that, we're going to use the input system because we've been using the input system, and we should continue doing that. let's go back to Unity real quick. Let's click on our canvas dialog box, and I'm gonna reset my window layout again. And this is the first time we've added input to something that isn't the player. So we're gonna do add component, player input, and then we're gonna click on the input system actions. Then we're gonna change the behavior from send messages to invoke Unity events like before. We're gonna go to events, and for some reason it didn't get plugged in, so we're gonna do it again. UI. We're gonna see if there's any UI events that we think are gonna be useful. We wanna like click or press the enter button or something to go to the next page. I see submit, I see click, I see right click. I think we want submit and click. Let's make sure submit isn't already like bound to the click button though. So let's go to the input actions, go to UI, submit. Yeah, it's not, it's just submit button. Okay, so here, player input, back in the UI. We're gonna try and drag in a function to both of these. The way the player input component works is any public void here, notice I say void, that means it can work with coroutines, can be put inside of this slot, and the code can be ran when we press, in this case, the submit button or we click. Let's do that. We need to make a public void that we want to run. We don't want the start dialog, we don't want the stop dialog. We want to make a piece of code that says, basically, go to the next dialog. If there is no dialog, then stop the dialog. So let's make a public void here. We're going to call it next dialog or stop. And here what we're going to do is we're going to say, we want to say go to the next piece of dialog. But the problem is we're not keeping track of what piece we're on yet. So what we're going to do is make a little variable for that. This variable is not a setting like the other variables we've made so far. This variable is being used to keep track of what level of dialogue we're on, which means we're going to make this a private variable. Private variables are basically used for when you want to keep track of things internally, and public variables are used for if it should be a setting that you can set inside Unity. We're going to make a private int, we're going to call it dialog index. Now, see how the dot thing is yelling at us? It says private members unused and make field read only. That's fine. We're going to use it in a second, but I just want to call attention to that. In the next dialog or stop function, what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're actually going to copy the start dialog thing here, and we're going to paste it here. But instead of 0 as our index, we're going to say dialog index. What we're going to do is right before this, we're going to say dialog index should go up by 1. So we're going to say dialog index plus plus, or we can put the plus plus before the word dialog index. It doesn't matter if you put plus plus before or after. It does the exact same thing with very, very, very minor differences. Integer values always have a default of 0 unless you specify something else. So this value is going to be 0. And then when we do the next dialog or stop function, it's going to increase it, and now it's going to be 1. Now when we start this coroutine again, it's going to be, this number is going to be 1 instead of 0. So it's going to print the next dialog in our list. We click the button again, it's going to go up again, it's going to be 2. It's going to put the next dialog after that. All we need to do now is set it to stop the game if it gets too high. So right here, we're going to say if dialog index is greater than or equal to dialog.count, then we're going to say stop dialog and return. The return exits this function early, because what would happen is it would stop the dialog and then it would still try to do this after it was done with the whole if thing. So return says stop the dialog and then quit this before anything else happens. It's going to ignore this line of code if this one happens because it's returning before it gets a chance to hit this line of code. This should theoretically work. It's going to increase our dialog index, and then once our dialog index is more than the amount of dialog we have to look at, then we're going to stop it. This count says how many things are in our list. It's important to know we're using greater than or equal to instead of greater than, because the index is 0 index. It starts counting at 0. but the count variable for how many things are in a list is one indexed. So if there's one thing, it's actually number one. It's not 0 or whatever. Let's try this. Let's plug it in. So in the none object here, we're going to drag in our dialog script. And then we're going to drag in our dialog script to the other one as well. And then where it says no function, we're going to click dialog. Where is it? Next dialog or stop. We're going to plug that into both of these dialog functions here. Let's play the game, try it out. I walk up, I press E to start it, and then I click to go to the next dialog. Nothing happens. Let me try enter. Okay, nothing happened. Let's make sure that I notice it says gamepad. Okay, I didn't think that was it. Let's see. Let's do a little bit of debugging. Let's clear out console. See. So it's not really doing anything. I don't know if it even knows the UI is like there. Let me try a player event like attack real quick. And then let's try dialog, next dialog or stop. The attack button is, I think it's click. Nothing's happening. Let's see if the issue, so there's plenty of cases where this issue could be, places where it could be. This could be in a problem with one of these lines of code, or it could be an issue with the player input UI not actually knowing clicking the button. To figure out where the issue is, let's put something else here. Let's put a different line of code. Let's just change the dialog boxes like name or whatever. We're going to change it to test. So if the problem is with the input system, then it shouldn't change the name to test when we press the submit button, which is the enter button. So let's see. I press the enter button and it's not changing the name. So we know this is where our problem is. I figured it might have issues doing this because the player also has player input, and I think it was saying this player is controlled by a keyboard, this one's controlled by a gamepad. So let's make some modifications to how we're getting the player input. Yeah, this should work in theory, but maybe it's a Unity bug or something. I'm not sure. I think really all we have to do actually is just move these two pieces of code to our player's input, player input function, because we have the submit and click right here. So if you go to your dialog box here and the player input that we added here and go to your UI, you can actually right click the submit one and then click copy and then go to your player and go to that submit one and then right click and click paste. And then we can actually paste it into click as well. So our player now has this stuff hooked up here, and this should 100% work because we know that the move and the interact and the sprint button works with our player. So let's get rid of the player input off of this dialog here. And then we're going to keep it on the player's UI for now. This is going to have a very small issue, which we'll address in a second. But let's see if this works. Press E, I press enter, and it goes to the next one. Although it was very quick. And the reason it was very quick is because both me pressing and releasing enter stopped the dialog. So let's fix that real quick. Since this next dialog or stop function is being called from the input system, we can add an input action.callback context ctx variable here. And now that we have some context from our button press, we can check to see if the button was pressed or released. So we're going to say ctx.readValue float. If it's equal to 0, that means the button was released. And we're going to say return, which is just going to exit from the function immediately before doing anything else. I explained that in much more detail in a bunch of other videos, so please watch pretty much almost any other video. Let me walk up the circle and press E to interact, then press A to go to the next one. I might have done something in edit mode because it's not doing it anymore. Oh, okay. So we changed the signature of this function by adding an extra thing here. So now we got to plug it back in inside of our player's UI settings. Yeah, you see it's missing. We'll plug it back in with this one up here under dynamic callback context. Now we're going to run it. Let's run into the circle, press E, and then press enter and go to the next dialog. And then press enter again. Okay, let's check it out. That looked a little buggy. Yeah, Jim said like hi with 2 eyes, which is obviously not what we did. So I think what's happening is this right dialog piece is happening twice when it's not supposed to be. We should have a little variable that we can use to keep track of if we're currently in dialogue or not. This had a bug I was going to address later, but it's happening already, so we'll address it now. If the dialogue is already being written, we can actually press the button, and what's going to happen is it'll try to print 2 pieces of dialogue at once, which we don't want. So let's fix that. Under our private int dialog index, we're going to make a private bool called isDialog running. And we're going to set both of these as soon as we start talking. So in our start dialog thing here, before the right dialog piece, we're going to say dialog index equals 0. And then that's just resets the dialog index every time. I just forgot to do that earlier. And then in our right dialog piece function here, right before the for loop, we're going to say is dialog running equals true. And after the for loop, after the amount of time has been done, we're going to say is dialog running equals false. A Boolean is a type of variable that keeps track of a true-false value. This is saying that before we start running the dialog, set it to true, and afterwards set it to false. So if this variable is true, that means the dialog is currently running. We're going to add a little quick check to say, don't let us go to the next dialog if this one's currently running. So let's do that real quick. We actually pretty much already have that here in the next dialog or stop. We say if we release the button, return. We're going to say if we release the button or if it's currently running, return. So after this equals 0 part, to say or, you do 2 lines here. And then we say is current dialog running. So if we release the button or if the dialog is running, then return. We don't want to increase the index or stop the dialog if it's currently running. Yes, you probably want some sort of click through the dialog thing in your game to make it go faster. We're not going to cover that in this video. That's like a little bit of polish. That this is supposed to be the basics. Let's try it now. Walk up to the circle, press E to start the dialog, then press enter, goes to the next one perfectly, press enter, goes to the next one again. Press enter, it closes this time. Gonna interact again. Gonna try it with the click button. Click again. Perfect, beautiful. This code works almost perfectly now. Let's actually try to break it though. Whenever you make something in your game, it is kind of sad, but you should try to break it because your players are going to accidentally do it all the time. So I'm going to press E and then enter, and then I'm spamming enter right now. It's working just fine. If I press E again, it does reset the dialog and it breaks it here. So that's not very good. Let's fix that real quick. We start the dialog here. We're just going to say stop all coroutines. And stop all coroutines does exactly what it sounds like. All of your currently running coroutines are just going to stop. And that should be enough to fix that. Now, the last thing we're going to fix. Now, clearly you shouldn't be able to interact with the character already if you're talking. Like if they're already talking, you should be locked there. You shouldn't be able to move or do anything. But it's fine. We're going to keep it like that for now. This is a basics video. Now, the last thing we're going to do is a small logistic change. There's a bit of a problem here. What if we have multiple dialog boxes? We're going to have multiple dialog boxes in a game, obviously. We're going to have a lot of them. Let's just do 2, for example. I just added a bunch so you can see that we're doing a bunch. But in this one, the second one here, this dialog is going to say, Derek wants you to watch these videos. eyes emoji. Kira is going to say bye. And then Jim is going to say, hi, I'm Jim. But issue here, our NPC can really easily change from this dialog box to this dialog box. If I change this to this dialog box's start dialog function and click play, walk over and press E, it starts to write dialogue. But when I press enter, nothing happens because our player's input events UI is still set up to the other dialog box. I hear you saying, oh, just drag the new one in. But now this one only works with the new one. We want the player's dialog functions to work with all dialogue. This is a problem. This solution is not expandable. It's not sustainable. Luckily, we don't have to change our script very much. All of this and this can stay exactly how it is. All we need to do is change the one function that our player accesses, which is next dialogue or stop. So next dialogue or stop, what we're going to do is we're going to take, basically, we need the game to store whatever the currently running dialogue is in a variable. And we're going to use that as a, okay, let's access the currently running dialogue instead of this dialogue. Because if there's like 3 dialogues or whatever, we plug in one of their stop functions here, it's only going to apply to that one. But we're going to say, find the current dialogue and apply the code to that instead. To do that, it's very simple. Under these private ints, we're going to, and bool, we're going to say private dialogue, current dialogue. And every time we start a dialogue, before we do anything else, we're going to say current dialogue equals this. Now there's a problem. Variables are unique. Every dialogue can have its own text speed, its own name, its own text, its own list of dialogue pieces. So this variable actually has a bunch of duplicates running around. To fix that, we're going to make this variable static. A static variable is like a global variable. It's shared between all of the dialogue scripts. None of the dialogue scripts have a unique current dialogue now. There's one singular current dialogue that's shared between all of our dialogue scripts, which is good because this should be the one single variable that references our single current dialogue. And every time we start a dialogue, it's going to update that variable to be whatever dialogue that ran the start dialogue function. Now that we have this current dialogue variable, all we need to do is inside of here, we're just going to use it a few times. Instead of is dialogue running, we're going to say current dialogue dot is dialogue running. And then we're going to say plus plus current dialogue dot dialogue index. Same thing here, same thing here, same thing here, and same thing here. And same thing here, and same thing here, please. Okay, I don't know if this is going to work. This one right here. We might have to do something. Oh, wait. I think we should do that. Okay. If this doesn't work, we'll do a very, very small change. But let's test it out before we just assume it won't work. Player's code is set up to the second dialog box, but based on this current dialog thing we added, it should work for all dialog boxes now. It might not work if it's disabled. We'll see. We'll see. Run into it, press E. Derek wants you to watch these videos. Click. Bye. Click. Hi, I'm Jim. Okay. Let's copy and paste our NPC. And this one is going to be the first dialog box. Dialogue. Start dialogue. Let's play the game now. Let's talk to this guy. Hi, I hope this video is helping. Hi, I'm Jim. Let's go to this guy. Derek wants you to watch these videos. Enter, bye, enter, hi, I'm Jim. This seems to work very well, actually. There might be some weird issues if you run over to one guy like this and then Yeah, it says both of them are open now. Yeah, don't open multiple dialog boxes at once. Let's see. Can we fix that really quick? We can actually. It's pretty simple. NPCs on interact thing. This code happens as soon as you interact with them. You can actually just drag in your player here and go to your player input function or component or whatever and click deactivate input. This will make it so your input is no longer active right after the dialogue starts. And then all we need to do is write a little event to activate the player's input. Let's do that really quick because it's probably something everyone needs. No, we can't deactivate input. Never mind, because the dialogue, like clicking and entering, is input. Instead, let's do the top-down movement component and let's deactivate that. We're going to say bool enabled, and it's going to be false like this, which is unchecked. We're going to do the same thing here. Drag in our player, look for the top-down movement function, and then we're going to disable it. Let's also disable the interact component. So now both interact and top-down movement are disabled. You would also add one for your like attack script and stuff like that probably. Let's see if this works before we add the code to re-enable it. Yeah, this works just fine. I can't move around. Oh, wait. Yeah, I can't move around or anything anymore. Immediately, I'm wondering if I start moving. Let's see if I start moving and run into them, if I just continue moving forever, or if I slow to a stop. I think I'll slow to a stop. No, I don't think I will. Okay, that was hard to test. Try one more time. I'm going to turn the gizmos on this time so I can see my player's interaction box. So I can not run right into them this time. Okay, little bug, player does keep walking. It's fine, we'll fix that in a second. Let's just do one thing at a time. We want to re-enable the movement and the interact after the dialogue ends. Simple fix. In the dialog script, and I swear we're almost done. Under the public tmp.tmp underscore text this here, we're going to say public unity event. Oh my gosh, why did I do that? Unity event on dialogue end. And then here where we're stopping the dialogue, we're going to add a line of code before this that says on dialogue end.invoke. Only reason we added this is the unity event lets us create these events in our code, which you can't see because I need to restart my layout again. And then, so you see on dialogue end here. Now we can just do what we did before, and we can plug in the we can plug in player, and we can go to the player top of movement and we can enable it, and then we can go to interact and enable it, and then we're going to copy this, we're going to paste it into this one here. Now when we stop our dialogue, we can move again. Last thing we're going to do is try and fix the fact that the movement just like goes on forever, although I might just say we can solve that in a separate thing, but let's see. Can I move back yet? I can't move back. Good. Okay. To stop the player from infinitely moving, let's really quickly do that. So we just enable our top-down movement and disable it when we start the dialogue. But the issue is that we don't like reset the rigid body. Let's see if there's just a way for us to really easily go to a rigid body to decomponent and reset it. I can sleep the rigid body. That might do it. Let's see. I only put that on the left NPC for now. I'm going to run right over them and press E. Perfect. That worked exactly how I wanted it to, actually. So this rigid body 2d.sleep function will stop the rigid body. Although, let's make sure to rigid body 2d.wake up for the when you're done. If you sleep it, you gotta remember to wake it up. Okay, walk past, press E, stop moving, go through, move again. Everything is perfect. Awesome. Okay, except for the minor thing that we can't skip through text. This is a pretty well structured dialogue system. You can put multiple dialogue boxes in your scene, different characters that talk, custom talk speeds, custom things that happen when you finish your dialogue, and a really easy way to implement the start dialogue function right here. You can use the start dialogue function in any Unity event, and you can set it up really easily to work with collisions and stuff like that. If you want it to happen like when you enter a box or something like that, like when you start touching it instead of when you interact with it, let me know. The interact script is basically just to show you how to get it like testing and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.